And so our framework for Christian discipleship is that just like Jesus, if we live in the midst of these relationships, we are to actually live loved. The basis for that, in thinking about the life of Jesus, is that in the critical moments of Jesus' life, the Heavenly Father shows up with a voice to say, I love you. You are my beloved. This is my beloved one. Listen to him. So when we consider the very life of Jesus, how Jesus lived in relationship, how Jesus lived in relationship to his Heavenly Father, to himself, to the stuff of earth, and to people, Jesus lived loved. Always the anchor and basis of his life and his decisions was about his relationship with the Heavenly Father. It was essential to his identity. That's the point at which he lived. Now, the difficulty of Christian discipleship is that we bring along this gospel and we tell you the gospel is to help you get saved. But the gospel is more than just your ticket to heaven. The gospel is this work of Jesus in our lives in order to redeem all of our relationships. And so the redemptive work of Jesus in our relationships gets seen in our relationship with God. And that's a question of worship. And it gets seen in our relationship to ourselves. And it's reflected in the matter of wisdom. But it's also reflected in this matter of how we relate to the stuff of earth. And this is a matter of stewardship. Stewardship. Now, we don't often see this, even though we're living in the midst of it. In a lot of ways, it's sort of like art. You walk past art. You might even walk on art and not know it's there. You might not really see it. Have you seen this?
Valuable investment.
Did you know that work of art was there? Do you know where that is? That's right outside the nest. How many of you are just now seeing this for the first time? Yeah, you're just now seeing it for the first time, but you walked past that Douglas fir. It's right there. Did you know the artist? Do you know her name? But it's right there. Her work is so evident. You don't know Esther? No? Did you actually stop and talk to the guys who were laying the bricks? They were doing it this year. Did you see them making art? You missed it. Friends, this is what a lot of our Christian discipleship is like sometimes. We don't even see what's present with us and how God is working. In fact, what we sort of have and exist is we just live in the shadows. Strange thing about this work is it's called the shadow. Ooh, deep, right? The shadow. Now, some of you are already asking because you've read the newspaper, you're thinking, is it really worth several $100,000? Oh, that's art. Is art work? It was somebody's work, right? And we wonder, is it really worth it? But is there a lesson, something here for us to be gained by this valuable piece of art? Someone's work. Someone's stewardship of her relationships. This is a work of art that's a stewardship. Her being a steward of knowledge and of gifts
and of experiences and a frame of reference in thinking about what is it like to turn artwork not into something that's vertical, but something that's horizontal. What would it be like to realize how big a Douglas fir really is? And that when you walk past those first growth Douglas firs on the way to Wreck Beach, you don't in one look capture the whole thing. You can't see it all. You have to stand in a different place to see it all. And often in thinking about our life, we need to stand in a different place to see it all. Because we're walking past in the shadows, not really comprehending and thinking about, in fact, we're just mindless about how we're living. And a lot of us are mindless about work. We think work has nothing to do with Jesus. Some of you are in university because you didn't know what to do next. I guess I'll go to university. Some of you are in university because you're hoping you'll get a job someday. And then some of you are still wondering why you're in university. And it's fourth year. So what is work? Work is, you can decide, A curse. A curse is the fall, a kind of punishment. Is that what work is? Work is B, completely amoral. It's totally neutral. C, work is a tool to enslave the weak. That's what you thought about chores at home. Parents are in charge, and so they give me work. D, work is part of God's vision from the beginning for human flourishing. That probably wasn't your answer. What is work? We often lose sight of this. And the way Jesus works is to disrupt our numbness about reality. So Jesus was often telling stories, some stories that were stories of delight, and some stories that were stories of disruption. And often in his parables and stories of disruption, he was seeking to cause us to grieve or to wonder or to feel dismayed, to get anxious. I thought Jesus didn't want me to feel anxious. Yes, Jesus wants you to feel uncomfortable sometimes. And so he tells stories of disruption and dismay so that we begin to pay attention. These are often parables of crisis. We're going to look at a parable of crisis that compels us to consider, what is it like to be a faithful steward? What is it to bring work into our gospel life? So I'm going to read from Matthew 25. This is the story that Jesus told that's in between two stories as Matthew has it organized. The first story is a story of 10 virgins headed to a wedding. They were part of the wedding party. And some of them were irresponsible, and some of them were responsible and got to be part of the party, and others who were irresponsible got left out of the party. I tell you, standing at the door of a party and hoping to get in, it's no fun. Then he tells this story that we're about to read, and then he tells a very familiar story called the parable of the sheep and the goats. And you may be familiar with that one, because he divides the sheep and the goats, and he says, these people did good, and these ones did not. And these ones did good because they actually served me when they served the poor, the naked, those in prison. and these did not. Now, in between, he tells a story that speaks to the very attitude and shape of a life of a disciple. What is it like to be a follower of Jesus? And he says it's like this. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. That's a big return. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. Wow. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. I was afraid, and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. That's always a bad beginning, isn't it? See, so you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Ouch! Are we disturbed yet? This is a parable that's intended to disrupt, to disturb, to discomfort. And it's also intended at the same time, I believe, to give to us a vision of what it's like to be a steward of Jesus. Our concern at the end of the parable is perhaps, well, I don't want to be the one who gets kicked out. I don't want the one who gets what they have taken away from them. I don't want to be the one thrown out where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. What is that anyway? Do you know what gnashing of teeth is? So you're weeping, and at the same time you turn, you're mad. You're mad. Right? It feels so unfair. You're mad at God. And weeping all at the same time because you've lost. But at the same time, there's 2 people in this parable who have extreme joy. Actually 3. Because the master's seen as happy as well. So here's what every steward needs to know. Every person who is a follower of Jesus is here in this parable considered as a steward. Someone who's received a trust. Something has been entrusted to you. In fact, we could extend this and say all those who have been born have been given something. You didn't start with it.
It's been given to you. You didn't earn it. It was given to you. And even what you earned has been given to you. It's a gift. And you are a steward of it. You are a steward of your relationships and all the stuff of earth. So how many stewards do we have here today? Are you a steward? If you're a steward, raise your hand. Hey, you already get part of the parable. Every steward needs to know this, and there's 5 things you need to know. You need to know the master. In fact, at the end of this parable, the great consequence of the steward, the lazy steward's actions, comes about because, one, he didn't really know the master. The master says, oh, you didn't even act on this faulty view of me that you had. Oh, you knew I was this kind of person? Well, then why didn't you do this at least? And so every steward needs to know the master. This is essential knowledge. Every steward also needs to know that she or he has been given a trust. They need to know, I have been entrusted with something. You know, it's that moment where you've learned to drive, and you have your in. And your parents have the keys. And so you come and ask, can I have the keys? Well, what's their next question? Where do you want to go? Why? What do you want to do? And so you explain, and then they hand you the key. They are entrusting you with keys. They're entrusting you with a vehicle. They're entrusting you with their wealth. They're entrusting you with their insurance. Right? And so this parable is intended to wake us up that from God's perspective, God says of every steward, I have given you a trust. And notice that in this parable, Jesus tells it in such a way that the trust doesn't appear to be equal, and yet the trust is equal. Each according to his ability. So God is entrusting, even according to ability. And God is intending to see ability increase so that he might give more. The third thing that every steward needs to know is that there's liberty. The steward needs to know that she has liberty to make decisions herself about what to do with the stuff of earth that has been entrusted to her. That every steward needs to know you have liberty to do something with your own brain. It's up here. Your own brain, your own body. Even your body is part of the stuff of earth that God has granted to you. God has only given you one body to live in. He's only given you one place for the spiritual life. Well, I know some of you talk about out-of-body experiences, but most of the time, all of your experiences are in your body, right? Some of you don't like your body. What is the body you've been given? It's the space you inhabit. And every steward is responsible. But they have liberty to choose. Liberty about what you do with your body. Liberty about what you do with your mind. Liberty to do something or to not do something with some kind of ability. You don't have to do all of your abilities. Part of the incredible occasion of university is that you have some time to decide, well, am I really going to pursue my artistic abilities, or am I going to be an engineer? Am I going to pursue my social life, or am I going to be a mathematician?
am I going to be really, really good at listening to people? Or am I going to become really, really good at astrophysics? Let's hope that's not necessarily mutually exclusive. But these are the decisions that you're making. Most of you have decided not to be concert pianists. Why? Didn't you all take piano lessons at age 9? Not all of you, but some of you. But not all of you have decided to be a concert pianist. You've actually made a decision. You have liberty to decide. And I know some of you feel like you don't have a lot of liberty because your parents keep making these decisions for you. But even there's some point at which differentiation begins where you have to decide, I will enter into that conflict or not. And so in this passage, the master doesn't actually tell them what to do with the bag of gold. What's in your bag of gold? What's in your golden bag? What's in there that you treasure? What kind of time do you have? And what kind of talents? The 3 T's. Time, talents, and treasures. You have liberty to choose. This parable doesn't examine what they did to make the money. The only point of conflict on that note comes at the end, where the person says, I buried it. I buried it all. I didn't do anything with it. And the master says, well, at least you could have done something, but you did nothing. And that's the accounting that every steward needs to know. Every steward needs to know there is an accounting to be had, that God does take account of this, that God does judge things. In fact, Paul later speaks of Jesus and the resurrection to say that the big deal about the resurrection is that Jesus has now been raised from the dead and ascended into heaven in order to be the judge of the living and the dead. And the judge of the living and the dead takes an account. And so to take an account of our lives. And every steward needs to know the 5th thing, and you noticed it's missing. And it was an oversight on my part, and I realized it's Saturday. But there's a 5th thing. There's an E, A, B, C, D, E. And the E is that every steward is really intended to know the master's happiness. That the stewards of Jesus are intended to know the master's happiness. Well done, good and faithful servant. Come in and enjoy the master's happiness. We are intended to enjoy the happiness of God, the delight of God in what we do as his redeemed people. A people who are living loved and making decisions and acting in faith and asking for grace. He says, hey, come on in. We have a great party to start. Enjoy your master's happiness. And not only that, the master's happiness is in giving us more valuables, more genuine treasure. On another occasion, Jesus says, he who cannot be trusted with little will not get much. But he who will do something with the little will be trusted with more. And this principle is meant to be enacted and worked out in your life and in mine. So I want you to think for a moment about what you're studying and what you've been given and the opportunity that you have And some of you are like, gosh, I wish you'd preached this sermon 2 months ago. I just finished my exams. What if I had done it differently? But that's not really the point here. Most of our exams are about comparisons. And as a follower of Jesus and a steward of Jesus, I'm not on a grade in relation to other people. And so I can leave the comparison work to Jesus. I don't have to compare myself to other followers of Jesus and say, oh, I need to be like that one. I really enjoy in the book list, the book by Tracy Kidder called Mountains Beyond Mountains. It's the story of Paul Farmer, who is the founder of Partners in Health. And he serves in Haiti, and right now he also lives in Rwanda. But in Partners in Health, this man works and works and works. And the driving force of his life is to work out, what does it mean for me as a physician to serve the poor and to help other people serve the poor? And so he has this physician's sort of grid in his mind about who he's going to help. He says, first the poor, then the prisoners, and anyone who's sick. And someone said, well, that's everybody. But yeah. First the poor, then the prisoners, and then the sick. In the Partners in Health office, there's a sign that has a layer that's covered up because it's rated R. But the first part of the line says, if we all have to be like Paul, that's Paul Farmer, we are all, and it's under the sign, royally messed up. They were trying to get off the comparison thing, that it would be deadly for them to compare themselves to Paul Farmer and say, we must be like Paul. Never look around in the Christian life and say, I need to be like Craig, or Ellen, or Peter, or Michaela, or Brindley, or I need to be like... No, you need to be the original God has created you to be. You need to be the original steward that God has created you to be in his kingdom, redeeming all that he places before you. And so no comparisons. You don't need to be like Mike or anyone else. But you do need to be like Christ if he was you. You are an original. That's good news at Origin Church, isn't it? You are an original. So as a steward, then, we have to work out that I leave the comparisons, that I answer for my own work, and that I need to be able to ask what has been entrusted to me and for what purposes of Jesus are being emphasized in my life. Now, we're not trying to make work into an idol to save us. If we are, we're in trouble, because your work will never save you. The issue in this parable ultimately becomes not how much was returned. The issue in this parable is the failure to really know the master. He didn't really know the master and the master's heart. And so there was no evidence of faith. There was no evidence of knowing in this character's life in the story. The question of worship had not been answered. And so we have to answer that question. I'm so thankful in Ephesians chapter 2 that it says it's not by works that you are saved. Instead, you're saved by faith, and that the grace of God. And so we're saved by this gift of grace. But it goes on to say then that we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works that he has prepared in advance for us to do. And I like that. That God is preparing good works for you to do in advance, even as he's preparing you and shaping you, and you become his art. In fact, the word there in Ephesians 2:10, referencing us, is that this word workmanship is a kind of craftsmanship, which is a kind of art. And that is our relationship to work. What aspect of your work is art? That it's more than technicalities. It's more than formulas. It's more than something just that the computer could do for you. But that work in and of itself is a certain kind of craftsmanship and has a certain moral quality about it. It is good. And then I know I really need Jesus for my work. And I need Jesus for my life. Because so often you and I think and act as if our work is what saves us. That our work is going to be graded, and then our grade is what saves us. Or our work is what secures us. And so therefore we can be a person who's worthy of respect. And that is not the gospel. The gospel really presses us in to say that Jesus would redeem us in order that the product of our life is the evidence of knowing him through industrious, faithful stewardship of whatever he gives us. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, I pray that you would help us to truly be originals here in this church and in UBC and whatever work that we do. That if we're doing the work of a student in this season, that we would find in there and enjoy and take delight in this great trust. That as disciples of you, we would take it seriously, but also joyfully. That even in our work, we would enter into your happiness. As we steward our time, our talents, and our treasures, that you would work in a way to give us grace so that what is produced in our life is actually more love. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's stand together and make this prayer our own.